Everybody, it's the second time this year, or in the last year, I've had to follow Admiral Caudle, so no easy task here coming on. But it is a pleasure to be here as the Department of War Direct Reporting Portfolio Manager for Submarines, or DRPM Subs, and also the Navy's Interim Program Acquisition Executive Undersea. Now, I'll spend a little bit of time during my remarks today describing my dual-hatted relationship as I go through, but as the slide behind me shows, and this is should be my only slide, if we can get it up, I go by the title Director Submarine Programs, which refers to my combined Department of War and Department of Navy portfolio. Before I start, though, let me just say thanks to Jim McAleese and the team for putting this event together and giving me the opportunity to speak today on the Department of War and Department of Navy's approach to the submarine and undersea acquisition portfolio. So less than a month ago, I was in this great job. It's called Commander Submarine Forces, and I really love that job. And while I hated to go, I realized that I now have the opportunity to spend my full bandwidth on delivering both submarines and undersea capability that my relief needs in order to continue to deliver our undersea forces as the true apex predators of the ocean. So I was relieved by Vice Admiral Rick Seif in Norfolk as Submarine Force Commander on February 20th. That was a Friday. And then on Sunday, I drove up to Washington, D.C. You may remember it was a big snowy day and everything that evening. Had a late start on Monday. And just so that everybody knows that the DRPMs are coordinating, I had a FaceTime video call that evening with General Dale White to talk about his experiences so that we could get off on the right foot understanding it. I had the good fortune the two-star in charge of the Air Force's medical treatment facilities graduated from high school with me, and she lives next door to Dale, so we got to go set that call up. And he's been a great partner as he's led DRPM Critical Major Weapon Systems and kind of getting me used to the DRPM role and advising me on how to approach the position. So then on Monday morning, I reported to the job as DRPM, and I issued my first 5 orders, which really just implemented the direction of the Secretary of War memo that had been signed out the previous August. On Tuesday, I headed south to Huntington Ingalls Newport News Shipbuilding Yard, and then followed that with a flight north up to Electric Boat's main yard in Grant, Connecticut, and its facility in Quonset Point, Rhode Island. So for the rest of my remarks, I'll talk about my observations as I walked around the shipyards, and basically my way ahead to get to our goal of producing submarines on the cadence we need to meet the worldwide threat. I think you're all pretty well indoctrinated into the DRPM concept, having already heard from both General Gutlein and General White earlier today. But I would like to point out, and I know that General White highlighted this as well, is that the Department of War was very deliberate in the programs they picked for a DRPM, and you see that it's all prioritized around the nuclear triad or our ability to defend and deter against nuclear attack. As DRPM subs, my first task was within 30 days to provide the Deputy Secretary of War, in coordination with the Secretary of the Navy, terms of reference explaining how I'm going to interact with the Department of War stakeholders, the organizational construct for DRPM submarines, and any additional authorities I need in order to be able to execute the DRPM role. So I provided that terms of reference within 30 days of my confirmation date, and it should be signed this week. And frankly, the only delta in the 30 days, which is really around March 1st, based on my February 1st confirmation, is a couple legal reviews, and we literally had one comment to explain the dual-hatted relationship, which was a late add, and then I think once that's resolved, we'll have it signed out in a day or two. So pretty minor comments going through that. So getting into the dual-hatted relationship, the challenge that we had when we stood up DRPM submarines was that all the program executive offices were immediately transferred to my DRPM role. But underneath those program executive offices is things that go beyond submarine design, construction, and maintenance. So I think the most obvious example of that would be maritime surveillance. So maritime surveillance talks about building these ships that drag around towed arrays, have nothing to do with submarines. So that was kind of clearly outside my portfolio. The Columbia and Virginia class program, building submarines, clearly 100% DRPM portfolio. And then there's a bunch of things that are either related or in the middle. So torpedoes, definitely something related to submarines, but I could feasibly build a torpedo as long as it fits in the tube without tying it directly to the submarine itself. But things like the combat system, well, I can't build the submarine without a combat system, but there's also a huge role in developing, designing, maintaining the combat system for our in-service submarines as well. And so, as the Navy got together and looked at this, they came up with what I think is a pretty elegant solution, which is to dual hat me as both program acquisition executive undersea, which covers everything outside of building, constructing, submarine industrial base, and in-service life cycle maintenance of submarines. And when I say that, I'm not responsible for performing the maintenance, but I do own all the maintenance standards that go along with building that submarine. And so the dual-hatted relationship lets me do both. Some things I do under my Department of War hat, some things I do under my Navy hat. And as an operator, this dual-hatted responsibility is not unfamiliar. So my history, I was working at Submarine Group 9 out in Bangor, Washington, and during that tour I had an operational hat where I was responsible for operating all of the Pacific ballistic missile submarines, and I reported to Norfolk, Virginia, Commander Task Force 114, which is the job I just had, to operate those submarines. But I reported to Commander Submarine Force Pacific in Hawaii for the man, train, and equip of those submarines. Now, just like then, I won't get it right every time. And some of these things fall in the middle. So it turns out sometimes maintenance impacts operations, or sometimes you're out there operating and you have a maintenance issue. So it's my job to figure out which things apply when. I'll do the same thing between my Department of War portfolio and my Department of Navy portfolio. And you heard General White talk earlier today about his tight tie with the Secretary of the Air Force, and really, he doesn't want two systems. We actually took that model, and we have a similar plan in the Navy so that, to the max extent possible, I'll use my Navy authorities to execute whatever I can, and then if I run into a barrier that I can't solve, or if I'm getting slowed down, I have the option to use my Secretary of War authorities, and that just lets us be more efficient. We can centralize our undersea expertise, we can operate under one system, and then if someday we get to the goal, which is that we don't need a DERPM anymore, then we just retrograde to the program acquisition executive undersea, and we're off and running without a whole lot of churn or transition. So I think overall, this was a pretty well thought out plan. The Chief of Naval Operations was a key architect. The acting RDA, Mr. Jason Potter, was a key architect, the Secretary of the Navy and the Deputy Secretary of War. All of us worked together to put this plan together, and so that's how we'll operate going forward to cover the full spectrum of undersea portfolio, be it in the Department of War or Department of the Navy. Okay, on to my initial assessment. So as I mentioned, I took my first week in the job to visit our two primary shipbuilders, and these were highly instructive visits as I went down and looked. Now, the first thing that I noticed was I was reminded just how exceptionally complex it is to build a nuclear submarine. These are exceptionally complicated and complex machines, and it really is eye-watering to watch them all come together. And I would encourage anyone in the audience who gets the opportunity to go tour our prime yards to go take a look and see exactly what our shipbuilders are doing to put these incredible machines together. It is anything but an easy operation. The other thing is, when I walked around, I got to talk to a lot of our shipyard workers and supervisors at both of our shipyards. And one thing I noticed was I did not find one single person who told me they got up in the morning and said, "Let me build submarines slower." Yet, everywhere you turned, you found barriers that were getting in the way. And in fairness, there was a lot of positives. I saw countless opportunities where there was hard work, lessons learned being captured, innovation, and examples where our workforce was showing how to take jobs that used to take 40 or 50 days and now doing them in 30 or 40 days. The problem is we haven't yet scaled that effort, and that is really the challenge going forward. We are not at our required construction cadence, and that's the challenge ahead of me as I take on this role as DERPM submarines. So ultimately, as I look across the yard, I see that we have a math problem. And now if you look back in history, there was a period around 2011 or so where we were building one Virginia-class submarine every 60 months. That's the goal. That's where we'd like to be at. But it turns out that the number of hours it takes to build one base Virginia-class submarine is about 13 million. Right now, we're trying to build 2 Virginia payload submarines, which is 18 million each, plus a Columbia submarine, which is on the order of 34 million hours. So I won't make you do public math, but if you add it all up, that's about 70 million hours that we need to generate to get to that 2+1 cadence. So 2011, 13 million. Now we have to get to 5 times that. So the punchline to that is that our industrial base and our industrial capacity is not scaled to that today. So that is the challenge going forward as we try to get to the cadence that we want. So how do we solve that problem? And just please let me be very clear. I've been in this job less than a month, so I'm not going to claim I have all the answers, and I reserve the right to update and change my assessment. But my initial assessment, I'll share with you. And I think there's 3 levers we have right now. So lever 1 is we can grow our workforce, right? Basically throw more people at the problem. And we're certainly working with our prime shipyards, and you'll see some initiatives out there about raising wages for the working force, recruitment, to get them into the workforce. But that's really more of a mid and long-term solution, because the reality is for the submarines that are being built today, so think District of Columbia, hiring a bunch of new green workers for a submarine that's supposed to deliver in the next couple years is not going to solve the problem. Now, I can outsource some of that, so if I can go get experienced workers and hire them to come in, that would help. So there is some workforce opportunity, but really scaling the workforce is something that I'm going to look to do that's going to make an impact more in the 3 to 4 to 5 year time frame when I can bring them on board, I can train them, and I can get them to conduct productive work. So that is certainly a lever that's out there. And then the outsourcing piece is really the near-term lever that I can help to build the submarines in construction today. The second and biggest lever that I have for today is increasing our current productivity. Now, we can do that through coaching, mentoring, forcing other deck plate improvements. We can get rid of low-value processes. We can write better procedures. We can bring engineers to the job site, and that's a big one. And the truth is, our performance today is really not very good. It's not anywhere near where it needs to be. So there is a lot of opportunity to improve, and I certainly believe that that is achievable. And I mean, we're not trying to go from 98 to 100, right? We're trying to go more from like, a low D to a B. So there is, a pretty good opportunity to improve in that area. So I think that that is a good opportunity. And the other thing we can do with productivity is bring technological solutions to reduce lead times for materials, to train our workers faster, to reduce production timelines, and to achieve higher first-time quality. And if you walk around an electric boat, I mean, just some examples of what they do. They have the opportunity where you can go put a headset on and you can look at a virtual reality version of the submarine. So if you're going to put a pipe hanger up, you can see exactly how it's supposed to look. So then when you go to the submarine that's not built yet and it looks strange, you get a better idea, but you could have actually gone there virtually first. So all those things save time as opposed to putting it in the wrong place and having to go correct it. So I think technology is another huge opportunity for us as we look forward at how to improve and build these submarines faster. Now, my third big lever is through our industrial base. And so we can improve our supply chain and specifically delivery of sequence critical material. So as I walked each of our shipyards, this term of sequence critical material came up again and again and again. Our supervisors repeatedly reported a recurring barrier to production for them is having material on hand when they are ready to do the job. So put simply, we can't keep building the submarine if we don't have all the parts. Now that seems unfathomable in this day and age that we don't have all the material we need. But the issue is that back at the end of the Cold War, when we got out of the submarine business for a period of time, many of our vendors either went out of business or shifted to other non-submarine production lines, and those remaining are scaled for lower production levels. So we're working to rebuild our submarine industrial base, and I see this as a very high leverage point for us as we look to reach our production goals. And I'm confident with the right focus, contracting actions, and oversight, we can end our sequence critical material delays. So with those levers in mind, I don't want to claim that I have all the solutions, but I've put together what I think are the 4 pillars we need to improve our submarine cadence over the long term. And as I try to orchestrate these goals, I see that as a primary focus for me and for my team. So I'll share those 4 pillars with you. The first is to stabilize design. We do not want to inject unnecessary engineering churn, and we want predictable production. We need to build tens of submarines with a common design so our prime builders and our suppliers can take advantage of the learning curve to bring down cost and schedule. That doesn't mean we'll never change design, but we want to restrict changes to safety changes or critical threat requirements. And deviation from the baseline design will come to me for approval, and we will only implement approved changes once all the necessary drawings, work packages, and materials are ready to execute. We simply can't get in our own way as we're trying to build these submarines. Second is to free up our prime shipbuilders at Electric Boat and Newport News Shipbuilding to do what they are uniquely qualified to do: module outfitting, final assembly and test, and delivery of our submarines. Every hour in the prime yard must directly advance submarine delivery. Other manufacturing work can be outsourced to other companies, leveraging their equipment, their space, and their workforce, with appropriate oversight from the primes. And I want to foot stomp that, because if you've never built it before, you're probably not going to get it right the first time. So we've got to make sure that oversight piece is in place. So we'll look to outsource to more partners, expand and develop our workforce, and engage with the supply chain early to improve output, quantity, and first-time quality. Third and related, we must align and activate our industrial base. The supply base exists. We must leverage its capacity more fully and provide the right incentives to get more out of it. We and our AUKUS allies need both submarines and spare parts. So let's turn that demand signal into the right multi-year contracts, the right timing of ordering critical materials, a cash flow model that allows companies to invest in their own facilities and workforce and productivity, and whatever else we need in order to improve production. We should move from just-in-time deliveries to building a monitored inventory system that includes a parallel production system for sequence-critical material. We don't want to face the same work stoppages in the shipyards we face today, so we need this sequence-critical material on a parallel path. Our incentive structure should reward material flow, decision velocity, first-time quality, and schedule performance. We will remove current barriers that increase lead times. We will engage directly with lower-tier suppliers to identify bottlenecks early and remove friction quickly. As we expand our supplier base, we'll provide coaching and oversight until suppliers prove their performance. And we will simplify vendor certification, streamline the inclusion of AUKUS vendors, and leverage modern technology for faster production and first-time quality. And I'll give you an example. I can't help myself of where we have some of these problems and that I'm committed to fixing. So there's a company out there that has to build a part. They've been building this same part for 20 years, and we've never had a problem. And then we invested and we gave them this tool that lets them measure the circumference of this part with like precision accuracy. Anyone want to guess the next thing that happened? Yeah, they couldn't meet their own certification standard because we used to just let someone measure it and we factored in human parallax error. Now we got through that, but those are the types of things that are out there that we've got to think ahead on so we don't run into these supply chain problems. So we want to make those decisions faster, and we want to make it easier, because I truly think that at the government level, we have some standards in there that are just not necessary in the 21st century, right? We're applying things that we did in the 1950s. Now, we want the principles in place. We want the technical rigor, the quality, and the safety, but we've got to figure a way to bring modern technology to bear to make that process easier. My final pillar is to design our future submarines for producibility and sustainability. We should avoid designs that only optimize performance but create barriers to on-time construction or maintenance. We will simplify designs where possible. We need to leverage digital design, automation, and predictive maintenance models going forward, as well as developing common tools and metrics that remove proprietary barriers. Now, as I told you before, I'm not claiming that I have all the answers or that this strategy is magically going to happen. There is a ton of work ahead, and none of this is easy, or someone would have done it before. But that is my initial strategy. I expect it will change as I get further in the job and as the organization continues to come together. And I hope that next year I'll be able to come back here and report back to you that we made progress advancing this strategy, and that I can back it up with concrete examples, that we've solved our key problems, or we're well on our way to that, and that we've improved our construction cadence. I fully recognize and embrace the national imperative to grow our industrial capacity and to improve our submarine construction pace. With that, I'm ready to take your questions.
Admiral Gaucher, thank you so much for that. Sam Adcock, I'm assisting Jim today. It is an honor, and interestingly, you were ops officer on OK City.
I was.
I went on her first sea trial. I was the assistant project officer for the USS Newport News, which was under construction as you were completing going to delivery and commissioning. I'm equally guilty, perhaps more so than many. I worked for the Senate Majority Leader many years later, some number of years later. I was in the conference meeting where we cut the drug deal to build one half of a submarine in one yard, one half in another yard, and of course we never got the full boat, at least not on time. So all of the speeches that I had written about if you don't build a ship as you go, when you need it, it won't be there. We're now suffering from that. We only delivered 3 boats between 91 and 98, something like that. You're digging out of a big hole. So you've got a lot of challenges in front of you. As you've taken on this new role, have you set new KPPs to try and drive change in the direction we need?
Yeah, so I have not gotten to the point of setting KPPs. Right now what we're looking at, and I'm stealing a little bit from my last job where I was trying to get submarine shipyard maintenance on plan, is tried to set up, hey, what are the key drivers, right? And I mentioned them in my levers already, right? So we got to grow the workforce, right? We've got to improve internal productivity in the yards, and then we've got to get material right. So those are the 3 things we've got to do. Then behind each one of those, we've set up, hey, what are the drivers that lead to those? So I've got to hire, I've got to retain, I've got to grow experience, I've got to train. I've got to get the engineering right. I've got to get the paperwork right. I've got to get sequence critical material on site. So those are the productivity things. Then at the material side, I've got to outsource. I've got to get the contracting right. I've got to fund things. I need advanced procurement authorities beyond what I have already. So those are that's kind of where we're at right now, but not to the level of a formal KPP. It's what we call a driver tree. And then we're going to set up hey, how do I monitor that at the macro level? How do I monitor it at the individual yard level? How do I monitor SSN, SSBN? And then how do I look to the individual project so I can see where the holdups are? Because if you look at the way construction works today, modular construction can actually be worse, even though it's meant to be better and easier, right? So the concept is if I have modules, I can let a bunch of people get to that module easily. I can turn it kind of on its side so I can touch all the way around it much easier. But if one module is not ready, it slows the whole thing down, whereas if I was just building one whole thing together, it would be easier. So you really do have to orchestrate all the pieces parts so they come together at the right time. And the perfect system that we want to get to in submarine construction is that I have the private yards, the main yards, building those big hull inserts, and then I have industry building the inserts, right? So then the inserts come in, the prime does that final module assembly, and then we bring all the pieces together, right? That's the perfect system we want to get to. I won't say we're a long, long way from that, but we're not there today. And so getting that cadence right, and that's why you hear the words like orchestrate and cadence, that's what the real magic is to be able to get to the pace that we need for submarine construction.
It's a very complex production challenge.
It is indeed.
The industry participants here all are talking about what is the demand signal. We've also, in the context of submarines, have heard a lot about suggestions related to an omnibus submarine effort that would package together perhaps $100 billion worth of business that would help drive that supply chain reconstitution. What is your view on that? What are your thoughts? Is it useful? Is it possible? Is it likely?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly anything's possible. I mean, right now, our full attention is on the next set of contracts, right, which is, we say it's the Columbia Build 2 and the Virginia-class Block 6 contract. So that's really the wolf closest to the sled. I do think we're making good progress on that. I was over at Office of Manpower and Budget last week, on the phone with them again yesterday, and I think, I can pretty much see the end in sight here. And frankly, as a taxpayer, you ought to be pretty happy that they're asking good, hard questions to make sure that the government is getting the best out of its investment, and that there's a way to ensure the return on that investment. But I think we're almost there, and then we should at least have that demand signal set, which sets us up for the next decade or so.
Sir, we have a question over here.
Before we jump there, can I finish on that one?
Sure.
I apologize, General. I'm sorry, he's going to kick me later for that. As the DRPM now, are you now injected into that decision-making process? In other words, if the primes were just saying, I'm just going to outprice to fix the problems, are you now involved the ability to basically make sure there's a carrot and a stick to what I sense is this contract eventually coming sometime this year?
I am, as DRPM, we are we own the authority to enter into negotiation on that contract. Now, there's some things you got to coordinate a little bit first, but yeah, that is our role. I mean, it's straight to the Deputy Secretary of War.
That is great news.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Steve.
Hi, Sam Legrone with USNI News. As federated shipbuilding and modular construction are becoming more and more sort of the answer for the solution of kind of like backlogs and getting things on track, how are you all implementing quality control? Because while there may be capacity there, we're kind of on the edges starting to hear kind of horror stories about modules coming in maybe in the past that were kind of wildly out of spec for what y'all need. I mean, how are y'all going to be assuring that you're going to be able to get these modules in place at the level of quality y'all need to go and accelerate this work? Thank you, sir.
Okay, yeah, Sam, thanks for that question. So first of all, we're not going to compromise, our quality standards, that certainly date back, to the Thresher. That memory is burned in effigy, and none of us are going to walk away from it. That said, we can't be afraid to understand the risk and to then apply the right rigor, even if it's not the same process that we've applied in the past to get there. So we're not going to compromise quality. Our test program is going to remain rigorous, and we're going to assure that we follow all the principles of quality that we've grown up with. Now, that said, I think what you might be hearing is that sometimes modules show up that are nowhere near the level of construction they need to be completed at. That's what we call deferred work. And what happens then is there's a lot of work to do at the end that should have been done at the beginning. And that just slows the whole process down because it actually gets harder if you try to put the module together with this outstanding work. And so that's part of my job, is to say no to that. And human nature is, right, we all want to win, so we want to say we delivered something, right? Well, if it's not ready to be delivered, I think that's the discipline that we're going to have to inject into the process to make sure that we're not getting a short-term win, which is going to generate a long-term loss in our delivery cadence.
Sorry, here.
Thank you. Again, congratulations, Admiral Gaucher. Great to see you, and your leadership is going to be perfect for this position, I'm convinced. Loved your 4 pillars. I'm fully aligned. I think industry is too. The one that I would ask a little technical question is, we looked at the sequencing critical materials you addressed, and then the designing and sustainment readiness in the future boats. Can you maybe touch a little bit on our legacy boats and how these these great vessels, submarines, are going to last for a long time and do great things and shoot Mark 48s all the time? And what I'm getting at is, when you get to those legacy boats, though, and sustainment parts, 30, 40 years, and maybe you don't need that many of them, but you need an industry player to stay hard, strong on the commitment, sustainment. Can you give any color there on how you think your mind is looking at that problem set?
Okay.
Thank you.
So great question. And let me just highlight. So you're talking about in-service boats. The key with, if you need something in the next 5 years, the only way you're going to get it is with in-service boats. So first of all, and you go look at our SSGNs right now. I mean, they're coming up on almost 50 years old. right? And these things were designed for like 32, 34 years old. So we've had to keep them in service. So that is a huge part of our portfolio in order to meet our strategic needs, right? I mean, the Ohio-class submarine has got to continue to sustain. And so the point that you're bringing up is how do you manage these obsolescent parts? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. One is we decide we need enough of it and it makes sense to either keep a vendor in service or get a vendor to pick up the service. And then we got to get into these things like vendor certification. Can we do it via an alternate method? Can we bring on additive manufacturing? And you heard the CNO talk about that. So that's one thing we can do. The other thing we can do is do things called rotatable pool, where we take an existing, say, for instance, a pump that is probably a bespoke pump that we may not be able to get somebody to go back into business to build again, but I could certainly refurbish that pump through this rotatable pool method. And that's the other way that we can get industry and the industrial base involved in order to help us out with these in-service submarines. And there'll be plenty of in-service work to do over the next decade as we maintain the Ohio class and transition to Columbia, and as we maintain our Los Angeles class fast attack submarines to support our global combat commander needs.
Admiral, there was almost,
Well, we've got 30 seconds left.
Okay.
Mr. Kadnazi's right here, ready to go up on the stage. But just to clarify, is your expectation push all the work out of GDB and Newport News that you can, module construction, and then what is the prime's responsibility for their subcontractors?
Yeah, so good question. Yes, my vision is that I would like to see as much work as possible pushed out of Electric Boat and HI. And I think if you go read the letter I got, one of the things I have to report back to DepSec War is how do I get to independent build at each yard, right? And I think to get to independent build, I might need some way to distribute that work. So if somebody could build the bow or a stern, then that would be an area where I could help, I could bring in like a third party to help achieve, 2 yards being able to produce their own submarine. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do. But you're right, the primes are still the primes. So as we write these contracts, we're trying to write them with incentives that incentivize the primes to make sure that the subprimes are producing what we need. And so this is a shared responsibility. And just if I could just have one last thing, I'll tell you one other thing I learned walking around the yards. So what I found was that if you go to Electric Boat, most of the problems are due to the supply chain and HII. Yes. If you go to HII, most of the problems are due to the supply chain and Electric Boat. And as most of you in the supply chain know, most of the problems are due to HII and Electric Boat. And you all blame the government, and we all know it's really Congress's fault. But the truth of the matter is, this is a we problem. Right, so this does not work if everybody shares responsibility in this, right? The primes have got to provide the right oversight to the sub-vendors. The sub-tier vendors have got to invest the money into the right things that we're paying for to produce the outputs we need. And then they got to produce it, and they got to be very careful not to get in over their head. This is a challenging business, right? And I can tell you, there's anything I've learned from the Secretary of the Navy and the Secretary of War, there's a lot of money out there. Money is not going to be the issue, but there needs to be skin in the game. And so we're going to ask for that, hey, how do we ensure the taxpayers' commitment? And when we put this money out there, that there's a way to be ensured that we're going to get it. And there's a lot of ways to do that. There's no one size fits all, but hopefully that answers your question.
That's a lot of money, sir. Thank God
Yes,
we have a Gaucher.
Yeah. Thanks. Just going to get my...